a significant...
Welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast.
Well, Perez has got the better of it, and he looks to get the better of Michael, and he's done it.
It's going to fall here for Alexis.
Henri, chance, goal!
This is me and Lean from arsenalvision.co.uk.
QPR 1, Arsenal 2. Sounds a lot closer than the game actually was in the end. But 3 points all the same. And it was an important week to win, as those around us all also won their games as well. So it's a case of as we were, really. Yeah, we were quite slow in the first half. Wasn't the best of first halves, but we kept them out. Improved a lot in the second half and got the goals. And then obviously we had to let one in, 'cause that's what we do. Yeah, I didn't think the defending on their goal was great. Let him have too much space in it. As we saw in the first half, he could really strike a ball, and that's what he did in the second half to pull it back. But we clung on to the victory. Of course, it could have been a more comfortable win, but at this stage of the season, when the game's coming thick and fast, important just to get the win. I was hoping for an even better performance before the Manchester United game, but it wasn't to be. But, didn't think we played as bad as some people say, and we won the game. This week, we are without two of the three usual members of the podcast. Elliot and Paul cannot make it this time, though James has stepped up to be the host of the show. And we're joined by two new guests, Ava and George, also known as Blackburn George on Twitter. So enjoy the podcast, and back after Manchester United.
Hello there, and welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. We are coming to you on the day after Arsenal's gritty 2-1 victory at Loftus Road. Sadly, on today's pod, we are without both Elliot, or at Yankee Gunner, who is continuing to enjoy the warm Caribbean weather, and Paul, or at Poznan in my pants, who is regrettably occupied by some damned thing called work. So you, my dear listener, are unfortunately left with me, James, or at GoonerFanatic49, as your host for today's show. However, it's not all bad, for in their stead I am joined by two both esteemed and knowledgeable guests on all things Arsenal. So let me first welcome George, probably better known as Positively Arsenal, who you can follow at Blackburn George on Twitter. Thank you, George, for taking the time to join us. Pleasure to have you on with us today.
Thank you very much for asking me. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. And also on the show with us is Ava McLaughlin. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Or at Ava EVAMCL3 from Arsenal Identity. Great to have you on the pod, Ava.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. So, Ava, let's start with you. An extremely important 3 points against a very dogged QPR side. But before we delve into the details of the game itself, what did you make of the starting 11? Rosicky came in for Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, and Mertesacker replaced Laurent at the heart of the defence. Were you surprised with the team that was selected, or was that pretty much what you had anticipated going into the game?
I was surprised to see Coquelin with this whole nose injury thing. And yes, of course, I was surprised to see Mertesacker. I mean, he's been not on his best, let's put it that way, in the last few games. So I was surprised to see Koscielny dropped, but at the same time I was quite happy because it means that the boss is looking for the best centre-back combination. And overall it was a good lineup in my opinion. I was just surprised that Chesney wasn't on the bench, but I found out that he was ill. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with Mertesacker coming in as a slight surprise. Although I personally was quite happy given that, prior to the signing of Gabriel, it was Koscielny that had been identified as the one with the prospective issues with his Achilles, the quite quote chronic injury that he has. So I'm glad that he finally did manage to get a rest, although it wasn't for too long, given that Gabriel was unfortunately hauled off after only 36 minutes. But George, what did you make of Mertesacker coming in and of the general lineup itself? Was that what you expected?
Well, I don't think anybody expected Thomas to start. Personally, I thought Aaron would start because he needs the game time before the Old Trafford match. But I'm never sad to see Thomas in the lineup. I did think Mertesacker would start because I saw it being an aerial bombardment and us sitting a bit deeper. So, yeah, I was happy with it. I'm always happy with the lineup. And Doesn't really bother which 11 takes the field for me. I'm happy to let people get on with picking it.
Right, certainly. I mean, I must concur with you on Mertesacker because with the likes of an Austin and Zamora, neither player who possesses a particularly, they're not necessarily known for their pace as such. Mertesacker is the type of defender that's able to, when under the cosh with a lot of balls coming into the box, especially given his height and his aerial prowess, he's the type of defender you would almost expect to play that kind of game. Moving on to the Rosicky alteration, I thought that was an interesting selection because it meant we had quite a lot of ball-playing midfielders. You had Ozil, Santi, Rosicky all on the field. I mean, even Alexis, who's obviously a quick, wide player, he likes to come deep and collect the ball as well and carry the ball. What do you think? What do you think went into Arsenal's decision making to bring in Rosicky instead of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain? Why he's sort of ahead of, say, Welbeck or even Theo Walcott, George?
Well, I think come this time of the season, Arsenal's historically looked to Thomas to drag us towards the end. He's just very dependable. You know what you're going to get with him. I can't really remember him having a bad game. He's had some outstanding games, but I can't think, he had a bad game today, Thomas. So he never lets him down. You know what you're going to get. Energy, commitment. Yeah, I think we'll see more of him between now and the end of the season. And rightfully so, because for the last 2 years, it's been him more than anybody that's dragged us over the line. So that's... I mean, you've got Alexis, who's, let's say, prone to giving the ball away. If you put Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain in there, then there's two of them prone to giving the ball away. And I don't think Arsene likes that. I don't think he minds one of them being a bit adventurous. But, with two of them on the pitch, he likes a bit of a balance. And Thomas certainly gives you that wherever he plays on the pitch.
Absolutely. I mean, Ava, is that something that you would agree with? Or would you have perhaps preferred to have a player who could sort of more stretch QPR's back line and someone who possesses the pace of Walcott, or maybe a more physical presence like that of Danny's?
I love Rosicky. I'm a big fan of his. I was honestly really happy to see him start because he's been doing so well. Plus, it meant that the Ox could, spend a game on the bench, rest, and hopefully get his energy up for the next one. I do agree with George with Alexis and Ox on it is a challenge to keep the ball. Would I like to see Walcott? Yes, of course, but at the same time, Walcott can be very frustrating, and I don't think for QPR you really need him because, we've seen yesterday that with a midfield that we had and Alexis and Giroud, we didn't run circles around our defence, but we were quite active and we did score twice. So I don't think we needed to risk Walcott, especially because he's still injury prone and he's still coming back to full fitness, and I'd rather save him for the Old Trafford game if I'm honest. As for Welbeck, I have the same opinion on Welbeck as I had on Walcott. I think it's best to let him rest for the Manchester United game.
Right, I mean, I think, we were definitely the better team in the second half, and we fashioned out several different chances. And I think, especially that chance for Ozil where, it seemed like an undeniable penalty and perhaps, if so, a red card. Rosicky was integral in that, and he played very well in that final third. And I personally was happy to see him in that lineup, especially when teams come and they press you high up the field in the way that QPR did away from home. It's good to have those players that are more comfortable under high press situations in that final third. But I did find it interesting because previously I'd almost thought of, is Theo second choice behind Welbeck after when Welbeck came back from his injury, he went right into the team. Then as soon as Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain came back, he was back in the team, and that seemed to push Walcott almost to third choice right winger. Now, with Rosicky having come in that position effectively, you have to wonder, how is Theo going to get back into this side? I mean, he only has 12 months on his contract as of this summer, and it's not difficult to see the similarities between him and Podolski in the sense that although Theo is a much more clinical and much more productive player, obviously he adds a little more to his game because he's quick and he's able to get in behind teams, and he's a danger for any opposing team. But unfortunately, what he lacks is that kind of, I suppose, teamwork ethic, that ability to get back and contribute to the team defensively. So, George, I mean, do you fear that the writing's on the wall for Theo? I mean, if not, how do you see him getting back into the side? Do you see him being in Arsenal's plans next season?
Funny you should say that, because just last night I tweeted that, sadly, I think Theo's on his way. I just don't see a way back for him. Much as I don't want him to go, something that Arsene said the other day about if you can't put in a defensive shift, you can't play in the team. You know, that's pretty telling, that. And Theo's been fit for a while now and hardly played. And are you gonna play him before some of these other guys? I don't know that you are, really. And I just can't see long term. I just can't see it. Not being a first choice starter, no. And I think he deserves to be a first choice starter somewhere, but I can't see it being with us.
Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because prior to that long-term injury, he was one of the star players at Arsenal. He was consistently churning out close to our highest amount of goals scored for the club and top assists, and was without a doubt a combined most productive player for a couple of seasons. And let's not forget, he's still only 24? Is he 25 years old? So do you think it's a change in Arsene's mentality, and that he feels that unlike before when perhaps he wasn't able to attract that type of player, that he's looking to create a team that's more well-rounded? Or is it now maybe perhaps with Alexis coming into the side, there's more goals being shared around the side, but not so dependent on having a Theo in the side? I mean, Ava, what do you think? Or George, sorry.
I think it's simply down to pace. Theo was the pace. He was the pace. There was no other pace in the team. So for the balance of the team, he had to play. And did play, and was good. But now we've got Bellerin, Alexis, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Danny Welbeck. Ozil himself can get a shift on. These guys have got pace to burn. And that means that the balance that he brought is already in the team. So what is he bringing other than his pace? His goal scoring, yeah, but these other guys are scoring goals as well. Plus they're doing all the rest. I love Theo, but I just don't see him in the starting 11. I think the time has passed him by. He's missed his window of opportunity, and it might have been that it was that cruciate ligament that made him miss that window. But I think he has missed it, and I think we'll cash in on him in the summer. No. I hope not. But that's how I'm thinking at the moment.
Yeah, no, I struggle to disagree with you. I do fear that he is going to be going in the summer. I mean, the one thing though that of course he's quick, but as you say, Alexis, Danny, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, and Bellerin especially, they all possess a significant amount of pace too. But what I really feel Theo brings to the side is his constant intent to get behind the opposition's back four, that constantly looking to get in behind through the runs he makes and the space that he occupies. Whereas I'd say more so, Alexis has a little combination of both, but even him to a certain degree, he somewhat prefers to take on a couple of men. I mean, you saw that a case in point in the way in which he scored our second. And Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain in particular, I feel one of the most important aspects of Alex's game is to really find that combination between coming in behind his fullback, and taking them on, but adding to that is also the knowledge of when to play right on the top of an opposition's back line and try and create that space through running off the ball rather than necessarily with the ball. Because otherwise he's a player that's extremely talented. But I do fear that when Theo's not in the side, we do sometimes struggle to make those runs and create those types of opportunities. I mean, Ava, what do you think? Do you see Theo perhaps getting back into the squad, or do you think the likes of an Alex will will permanently have taken his position in that sort of not only starting lineup but sort of that squad position as well?
I've always said that the issue with Theo is that he doesn't track back, and Podolski didn't do that either. And Podolski went off to Italy somewhere, and Instagram probably. If Walcott wants to make it, it is possible. Sure, it is, because he's still young. We all know he can do it, but he needs to put in a shift, and he doesn't just need to do that during games. He needs to show it in training, and he's got one massive disadvantage, and that's Oxlade-Chamberlain. I mean, Alex is there, he's ready, he's fit, he's fast, he can, help Bellerin or whoever's playing right back defend. He tracks back, but he also goes forward. It will be really difficult. It's not impossible, but it will be difficult, and I don't know if he's up for that challenge. Plus, he's just been injured for a year, so if he wants more money on his contract or whatever, I honestly don't think Arsenal would give it to him, so I can totally see him leave in the summer. I would like to see him stay, of course, because it's our Theo, and he's an amazing player, and he's an amazing guy, and he's quite intelligent and quite mature, and has always been quite mature too. I mean, he's one of the very few England players who probably never got into the press for really bad things, or getting drunk or smoking or whatever.
Certainly not in the showers.
But he's a good man and he's a good player, but he has to put in a lot of work to make it as the Arsenal first team, especially to make it into the starting 11. And I don't know if he's willing to be a substitute, but if he keeps this up, he will be a substitute with Arsenal. And honestly, because I like Walcott a lot, I think he deserves first team football. But at the same time, I also think that he needs to work for it. And if he doesn't work harder, he's not better than Oxlade-Chamberlain, for example, then he might as well leave.
Right, and even at this rate, he's more of an unused substitute than even one that's even getting, say, 15 or 20 minutes on the field. So, well, look, it's going to be an interesting decision for Wenger to be making over the upcoming months, and I think we'll probably have a better understanding of where this one will shape out in the coming games. I mean, obviously, the one thing for Theo is that it's going to take a lot of time after an injury like that to really regain his full fitness, but also his confidence and his mental strength and his ability to really put to be at the top of his game. So maybe Wenger's waiting on that, but unfortunately you feel that the only way he's ever going to get to that level if he's playing consistently, and right now he's really struggling for game time. So I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But moving back to the game itself. So in the first half, QPR, they pressed us very well, much like Palace did at Selhurst Park. And to be honest, we seemed to struggle to get a foothold of the game during the opening 45 minutes. But we came out and started the second extremely brightly and ultimately fashioned out several chances. And to be honest, we could really have taken a 3 or even a 4-goal lead prior to the 80th minute. Now, George, why do you think it is that we tend to, especially away from home and to struggle against these teams that press us high up the pitch, that give us very little time on the ball? Do you think it's inherently, just a very difficult tactic in itself to combat that most teams struggle with? And what was it that we perhaps did differently in that second half that contributed to the superior performance for that second 45?
Well, first of all, I think it's something that works against any team, not just against Arsenal. If you deny any team space and harry them, you're going to give them problems, not let them settle. Teams have been trying it with Barcelona for years, and it works, and it works until they've run out of legs. And you've got to accept that at the beginning of the games, that high press closing you down will stop you playing your game. You won't get into you won't naturally flow. And the other thing is that, I don't know if you've noticed, teams have taken to destroying the pitches before we get there recently. Yeah. It was something Martin O'Neill did about 3-4 seasons ago. Remember when Per did his ankle up at the Stadium of Light?
Yep.
He turned it and he was out for a few weeks. The week before, it was a pristine pitch. The week after, it was a pristine pitch. And the week we played them, it was like a ploughed field. It really was. I mean, it looked like somebody had been going around with a shovel digging lumps out of it. I think and they used to grow the grass long, but they've stopped them doing that now, haven't they? There's a rule now that you can't grow the grass above a certain limit. And that as well stops you playing a controlled passing game. And the two combined means you're going to struggle away from home. That's why it's difficult for teams to win away from home. And that's why all these smaller teams can beat the better teams away from home, because it's a bad pitch and their energy levels and the physicality. And I do think referees let the lesser teams at home be more physical than they would allow us to be if we were to try and match their tactics. So those three things combined, I just think to myself, well, we're not going to play well in the first half, maybe not for the first 60 minutes. We'll come into it at the end. And inevitably we do, really. You see us, everybody said, oh, we played better in the second half. We came out, what did Wenger say? I don't think he says anything. I just think he says, don't worry, the legs will go. And we then get the ball on the ground and start playing it. That's my theory anyway. And it seems, the more I watch, the more I think it's right, because it happens so many times. It's us controlling the ball. You can't. Literally, these guys just steam into you and kick the ball up in the air. The ball, and it's like head foot. We're not actually kicking the ball; they're heading it back and forward. So, you just got to live with it early doors and get on with it in the second half of the game.
Yeah, I think naturally in these types of games it can take a little while to sort of settle into the rhythm of the match before you can really start to make the typical interlinking plays and passes that we tend to like to do when we're in full flow. Although we have for much of the season also been a team that's like to start quickly and score within the first 30 minutes. And of course, the way in which you approach a game, especially say in the second half, can be very dependent on the context of the game. The current score. Often, if we take that early lead, we can be a little more compact, try and restrict the number of chances that we concede, and maybe hit teams on the counter. And I think we really did come out well in that second half. I mean, right from the off, I think that Ozil chance, stemmed from Rosicky out on the right, came pretty early, and we posed a consistent threat to Robert Green's goal, and I think Robert Green in particular had a very good game. But Ava, why don't you talk us through a little bit of the first goal that Giroud scored? I mean, Olivier's been a player he's come under a little bit of scrutiny after that very disappointing performance at Monaco, but he seems to have responded well. What have you made of his? He scored against Everton, and he's now scored against QPR, the first and probably the most important of the two goals. So how have you made of his rebound, so to speak, after that Monaco performance?
I think Giroud knew he had to prove something, and I think he stepped up to the game, and he did well so far. I mean, yes, he wasn't quite there during the Monaco game. Well, he was there, I think, but he didn't really do much. But ever since then, he's been trying really hard, and I've always felt like the criticism he gets is really, really harsh. I mean, people expect him to be, I don't know, some kind of Cristiano Ronaldo every single game or something, and it's really frustrating. And to be honest, he does really help every single time he grabs his hair. I just want to punch him. But he stepped up and he did what he had to do, and to see how frustrated he gets also means that that he cares and that he wants to. And sometimes, for those who play football, they know this. Sometimes whatever you try, it doesn't work. And sometimes you try too hard, and the harder you try, the less that works out in your favour. And the more frustrated you get, the less you start playing. But I think, he kept his cool throughout the last two games, and he had quite a few good goals. And I think he's doing rather well, and I'm very pleased to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Elliot will be cringing in the Caribbean as I say this, but I've really grown quite a liking for Olivier. I think he's a player that brings a lot to our team. I think you can talk about even sort of the defensive shift that he puts in. For a centre forward, I think his work ethic is very commendable, and of course defensively from corners and set pieces, and the way that we've grown not only defending but also attacking set pieces. I think we've scored the second most set pieces of any team in the league this year, which is certainly not something that you would associate with Arsenal. But obviously it's much talked about his ability to win those aerial duels. His dominance physically and aerially is fantastic, especially from goal kicks. The way that he can alleviate pressure, the way that he brings other players into the game and starts off those attacks, in and around the final third and the halfway line. And one of the biggest criticisms of Olivier last season was probably that of his conversion rate and his finishing, especially in big games and important matches. But and unfortunately that obviously did creep back in against that Monaco game. But in general this season his conversion rate has improved significantly, and he looks like a much more dependable striker. I mean, George, what are your thoughts on Olivier?
I think, personally, he's the most underrated player in the league. I'm not saying he's a world-class player, but he's talked about by some people as if he's some sort of liability. I can't think of any player in the league that can do his job as well as him. I'm not saying I wouldn't swap him for Aguero, but what I'm saying is what he brings to the team, the flicks, the control, the hold-up play, the occupying two centre-backs, goals. I mean, he's in the right place at the right time yesterday. He wasn't, he moved into that space. He saw what was happening. I think he's a terrific player. I really do. I rate him really, really highly. And the one criticism you can make of him is he's not fast. Well, okay, he's not fast. Well, if he was fast, you'd be talking about a 70, 80 million pound player.
Yeah, no, I mean, I struggle to disagree with that, and I think that's one of the biggest factors for Wenger to really figure out with regards to the balance of the team is the way in which he brings the pace in and around Giroud. I mean, we talked a lot previously in seasons past that Walcott was integral to that combination between the Giroud and himself. Walcott was able to use his pace to get in behind, whereas Giroud was the man, creating that link-up play. And I think Aaron Ramsey also contributed to that, the way in which he would get beyond Olivier. And that combination was one that seemed to prosper significantly, especially last season during Aaron's so-called pomp. But another player that I wouldn't say has come under criticism, but perhaps I think fans have been quick to almost use the typical excuse of someone requiring rest and having been played perhaps a little too much. He hadn't scored in 7 goals prior to the QPR game, and of course I'm talking about the wonderfully delightful Chilean Alexis Sanchez. Ava, what did you make of that? Well, I mean, first I suppose that almost missed opportunity only minutes prior to him then scoring that quite remarkable goal at Robert Green's near post. Was this, was he a player that had just been, had been lacking a little confidence? Was it a player that had perhaps been a little tired, or is that just one of these little sort of patches that players tend to go through? And what did you make of that goal itself?
That was an amazing goal. I first thought it didn't go in, so I was like, what? And then I just jumped up and started screaming. But as for Alexis, he's like a Duracell bunny. He never stops running. I've been paying close attention to him this game because he frustrated me during the Everton game. It wasn't one of his best. He frustrated me. That's not the right word. He was just, it pains me to not see him do well, kind of thing. But he was back and he was running everywhere, and I was so happy. I mean, how can you not be happy to see Alexis Sanchez in your shirt playing for your club? That's just fabulous. And then he scored, and well, the assist was amazing too. But he scored, and it was an incredible goal. And I think we were all just happy to see him back, and you can just see his face light up. But the thing I love most about Alexis is that he never gives up. Even if he doesn't have a good game, he just never gives up. He always keeps trying, and he's always running and looking for that chance or opportunity. But what people forget is that he doesn't just do a lot for, the attack. He always helps out the defence, and that guy's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
he's just fabulous.
he's such a pleasure to watch. I mean, you can just tell he just loves to play the game, and it was almost, looking back now, it's almost somewhat humorous. So that chance before where I guess he in some ways almost had too much time, but it was a much easier chance presented to him. And I think actually, when you look at it again, I think he was trying to pick out Ozil across the face of goal, which Green stopped. And I think he thought a little too much about it. It wasn't almost instinctive enough. And unfortunately, Robert Green was able to quell the danger. But that second goal, I mean, it's just such fantastic feat. You know, especially the amount that we've been watching Alexis recently now, that he loves to cut down the byline, but then cut back in on his right and try and fashion out that half a yard of space. And sometimes he'll bend it round the goalie. And I think, what was it, home to Stoke, where he, it was a somewhat similar goal where he fired it into the near post as well. And his ability to score a goal of that class, especially having just missed a much easier opportunity and having been a player that was perhaps a little shorn of confidence. It was brilliant to see. But of course, in quite Arsenal-like fashion, we did manage to make a pretty a nervy last 10 minutes of the game, conceding in just after the 80th minute, putting ourselves under the cosh. I mean, George, what did you make of that, the Austin goal? I mean, there's a lot of people thinking that, it was like one of Gibbs or Koscielny should have got closer to his man. I know Gibbs was trying to cover the player coming down on his left, from the right wing, and Koscielny was that little yard away from it. What could we have done to have prevented that goal? And how is it that on a somewhat regular basis we tend to, as a team, I enjoy is certainly not the right word, but we do tend to put the pressure on the fans and the team itself later on in the game.
Well, first of all, I think you've got to say it was a wonderful strike from him and a nice bit of skill. We could have done more, but you can say that about every goal, really. It was a good goal. I think Gibbs gave him a little bit too much space because he was tempted to cover a run. But, let's not read too much into it. It's just a goal. We were dominant, but you see it, because it's Arsenal, we notice it. But every team gets it. The same things happen to them. The cruising and somebody knocks a ball in and all of a sudden the game changes and it's frantic for 10 or 15 minutes at the end. That's football. I don't think we have a particular problem. I think that's just a game. So, I wouldn't worry about it too much. If the home team can't score a goal, what do you expect from a game of football? They're as entitled to score as we are, aren't they?
Sure. I mean, although they are a team that's currently in the relegation zone, but no, I do agree with you. I mean, and to be fair to the team as a whole, outside of that goal, QPR didn't create that many clear-cut opportunities. I mean, Austin had a wonderful strike in the first half. It was only a couple of inches away, and Ospina did make a couple of good saves throughout the game. But from that goal onwards, we looked very solid, and as nervy as it was watching, we certainly didn't look like a team that was under a significant amount of pressure. Certainly not mentally, and we handled that. We kind of navigated that final 10 minutes extremely well. Now, given the context of the game, Ava, who was the player that stood out the most for you? Who was your man of the match?
This is only because I was also on Twitter, I think. No, my man of the match was... Oh, don't do this to me. There were so many good players. I really loved Ayreen yesterday. He was amazing. I loved Coquelin yesterday, and I never thought I'd ever say that. But he was great. Giroud was there, Alexis was there, Santi, O'Toole. Don't make me pick one. But the one that stood out for me was for one reason and one reason only. It's because he's been bashed on Twitter, and he always gets bashed on Twitter, so you sort of get used to it, but it frustrates me a lot. And that was Kieran Gibbs, because he did get, assists. So I constantly kept watching Alexis, Sanchez and Kieran Gibbs, and in between I saw Bellerin flying by and Coquelin flying by, and I saw all kinds of players flying by. But I think the player who stood out for me most was Gibbs because he's Gibbs, and because everyone keeps bashing him, and it annoys me so much. So stop bashing him.
No, I mean, I do think Gibbs had a very good game. I mean, he's got a good combination. He's got a lot of pace going forward, and you can see it in his play that he was a winger growing up. He's very comfortable on the ball and played an integral role in that first goal. And I have to agree that the team as a whole played very well. I was extremely happy to see Mertesacker put in such a good performance, especially after a little bit of criticism he's received recently. And we talked earlier that it does, or it is the type of game that suits him a lot more when he's not having to be on the back foot, when we don't play a high line with pacey players coming in behind. But George, before I know you have to go shortly, but who for you was the player that stood out?
Well, last night, watching the game, I thought Bellerin myself, but I've watched it again today, and I've changed my mind about 6 times. I went for Ozil, then I went to Rosicky, then I thought Santi was good, and so yeah, I would go with Bellerin myself. I mean, I think the lads. I mean, I watched it the other day on the TV, and the commentator said, "Oh, he's quick, but he's not very good with the ball at his feet." I thought, what player are you watching? Oh, Jesus Christ! The boy is a real talent. Dani Alves is leaving Barcelona. I hope they don't come in for him, for Hector. He's that good. I think he's that good.
Yeah, I mean, I have on this pretty nonsensical agenda of mine, a point to talk on Hector. I mean, Bellerin, he's a player that looks to have grown in confidence, and it's easy to forget he's only 19. He's so quick on the ball, and he's in quite the opposite to what as the commentator mentioned. I mean, he's fantastic with the ball at his feet. His ability to drive past players and swing balls in. He was superb at right back last night. So do you think he's cemented his place as sort of the second choice, or do you think there's even a chance of him perhaps, having grabbed Debussy's spot even when he's back from his injury?
Me personally, I think it's very, very close by the time Debussy gets back. I think Debussy's still all round the man for certain games. If it's one of the bigger games. But when you want to dominate a team and when you want to pull them to shreds with the lesser teams, I think Hector's got to be in with a chance of playing, hasn't he? I mean, he's frightening. I mean, absolutely. His pace and his close control. Wonderful player. What a prospect. We're so lucky. I mean, we're not even mentioning Chambers. It's like he doesn't exist anymore. And he was bought as the second choice left back, and then of course you've got who is it? Jenkinson out on loan as well. So we're going to be queuing up for that spot.
Yeah, no, I imagine Chambers will probably come in as sort of third or fourth choice centre back in the long run. So that's certainly where I would foresee his position being. But listen, George, I know you have to head off, and I don't want to keep you any longer. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. For those that would like to hear more from George on Twitter, you can follow him at BlackburnGeorge. Pleasure. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, and good night.
No problem. Cheers. Well, Ava, before we wrap up this pod, there's just a couple more things that we can discuss. I mean, moving on from Hector, a player that's, in my eyes at least, has unnecessarily received quite a lot of stick, and in quite an amusing manner, in that he's often berated for his laziness and his body persona as such. I mean, and obviously I'm talking about Mesut Ozil, a player who has in fact covered more ground than any other Arsenal player since returning for his injury. Now, of course, don't take me wrong, stats don't always speak the whole truth, but they seem to certainly indicate an entirely different story to what others will have you believe. Now, what have your thoughts been on Ozil, especially in 2015, and what he brings to the club?
I think everyone who slams Mesut Ozil and says he's a lazy footballer knows fuck all about football. That's one. No, I love Mesut Ozil. I mean, if you like football, you don't like Mesut Ozil, you're doing something wrong with your life. I don't like telling people how to support a club or whatever, but if you don't like Mesut Ozil and you do enjoy football, you should probably reevaluate how you watch football and start watching Ozil and forget about the rest of the team, because he's just one hell of a footballer. I do understand where the criticism comes from, because he has this look about him where he looks like he's not interested and he looks a bit lazy. But if you look at him for Germany and if you look at him for how he played for Real Madrid, he always has that look about him. And you know he cares, because he runs like up and down the pitch and left, right. He goes everywhere. I do understand where they come from, because, you know, loads of people just look at the look on the players' faces and they look at their body language. But has anyone ever considered that maybe that's just how he stands and maybe that's just how he runs? And, you know, sometimes I feel that he can run a bit more. But then, you know, stats pop up like they did today or yesterday, and you're like, turns out I was wrong. But Mesut Ozil is one hell of a footballer, and anyone who disagrees with that can just piss off.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. He's such a delight to watch, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just ask one thing?
Sure, of course.
Mesut Ozil is number 11 for us, right?
He is.
You know that I've just watched a QPR team sheet.
Okay.
And I'm still shocked with Wright Phillips being on there. Do you know that Wright Phillips is number 11 for QPR?
I did not know. I didn't know Sean Wright Phillips still existed as a football player, I must confess.
I had to see it. And now I find out that he's number 11.
And he's on the bench. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad to see that he's still, you know, kicking about.
Keep going.
But yeah, no, I mean, moving back to our very own number 11, I mean, I think in particular from that game, there were just a couple of such memorable touches. There was that moment right on the touchline where he kind of dinked it past the player, then cut back inside, created the space, and played the ball out across the other side of the field. I mean, that turn in the box was exquisite. The way he just turned the defender, and you know, Green made a great save onto the post. That would have been a fantastic goal. And I think there was another moment in the game where he almost chops it when he makes that Cruyff turn and just sends the ball in the complete opposite direction. He's just so fantastic with the ball at his feet, and I've got to agree with you. I think he's just so underappreciated by so many fans. I think one of the problems supporters have is before he came to the club, they imagined him as a different type of player to the player that he is, and I guess in some ways it can often be difficult for certain fans to perhaps see exactly what it is he brings to the side, but there's no denying that, especially since he's been back, he's been one of our star players and has been absolutely integral to the results we've been churning through in the turn of the year. But moving to another player, and you know, probably one of the most disappointing aspects of the game was that injury to Gabriel after 36 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, of course, we can now probably, you know, truly brandish him as an Arsenal player. He's gone through the proper initiation process so early on in his career at Arsenal. But you know, it's a shame because he's shown several bright moments in his brief tenure at the club. And you know, prior to that injury, Gabriel had already won 8 aerial duels and had 12 clearances, but he only had a 58.3% pass accuracy. Now, do you think, you know, albeit from the very brief moments we've seen of him, do you think that kind of speaks volumes for the type of player he is? I mean, I know Arsene talked about after that game against Middlesbrough that he had that handbrake on, as Arsene likes to refer to it, especially with regards to his distribution from the back. But you know, counter to that, he seems to be very quick. He likes to come in with various interceptions, looks very strong in the air. I mean, what have you made of his brief start to the club?
Gabriel is exactly the defender we've missed for so long. I mean, any defender that looks like he will kill your family in a heartbeat is a good defender in my books. And he looks like that. He always has that look on his face. But he's also an incredible defender. I mean, if you look at his tackles and the way he tackles and his timing, it's fabulous. And I knew he existed before he joined us, sorta. And I've been looking at some old games that he's played, and even there you could see, he's good up in the air and he's good with tackles. He's basically a ruthless defender, but he is fair, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, he does look like a scary defender, but he's got an even scarier haircut, I think.
Oh my God.
And perhaps that even adds to his game. But yeah, I mean, like, the final player that I wanted to touch upon, and for the regular listeners of the pod, they'll know that I'm a big fan of Aaron Ramsey, and I think, as is very prevalent in the footballing world, we as fans, we can often suffer from, short-term memories and, to a certain degree, confirmation bias in certain performances that players put out in a very short period of time. And I've greatly, I keep harking back to the season that Aaron had last year and just how phenomenal he was and how big a role he played in, especially, leading through that run when we were topping the table. And of course, who can forget the game-winning goal in the FA Cup final? But by all accounts, he's struggled quite a lot this season. A lot of that can probably be played down to the several hamstring injuries that he's suffered, and hopefully, as Wenger has said in his most recent conference, that they've identified what was the issue pertaining to those injuries. But we saw that he came on for the final 15 minutes or so last night. And how do you see him getting back into the team? Do you see him coming in for the position that Santi's been playing at? And if so, how does the team and the shape-up of the team alter as a result of that? Or do you think he'll be on the bench again for the United game on Monday?
This is the kind of question that makes me so happy I'm not the manager of Arsenal. I think if I had to choose now between, you just mentioned Santi and Aaron, I would go for Santi because he's in shape. He's doing exactly what he needs to be doing. He's creating chances. He's a strong player at the moment. He's a very good player for us. And I would rather rest Ramsey and use him as a substitute instead. But this is such a lovely issue to have, that you do not know who to put on the pitch because you have too many good footballers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I never thought we'd ever have that issue. So this is one of those moments where I just, I trust the manager, and I hope he makes the right decision. And, he probably knows better if Ramsey's ready to play a game against Manchester United, or if he needs to be rested and used as a substitute or whatever. I'd leave that up to him because I just don't know. I literally don't know.
Right. I mean, it's certainly the best kind of headache for the manager to have.
Absolutely.
I mean, on that point, with regards to Ramsey, is that I think Santi has been excellent and has probably been one of our best players this season. In fact, maybe our best player. He's been phenomenal going forward. He's got such wonderful double-footedness. He's put in a strong defensive shift at times as well, and his ability to transition the play and hold on to the ball in tight situations, and those delightful twinkle toes of his. He's just such a delight to watch. But I do fear that in the big games, the tough games away from home, he doesn't have that real physical presence, certainly defensively, for that position. So I do wonder that when we head to Old Trafford, I wouldn't be surprised to see Aaron come back into the side with maybe Santi back into that attacking central role of his, with maybe Ozil and Alexis pushed out wide with Giroud up top. But as you say, of course, it is the best kind of decision for a manager to have to make. Unfortunately, he's the one that has to make it, and that's what he's paid the money to do. But speaking of this game on Monday, I don't know about you, but personally, I'm somewhat bricking it because I think now with the Champions League probably, most likely a foregone conclusion, and even if we do head for a third place, a third position in the league, a lot of whether this season will be deemed a failure or a success somewhat hinges on success in the FA Cup, and certainly getting the big results in a season. I know we've gone to Man City and we've got to win, but that being said, it was also at a time when City was struggling, and we really need to come out of a season with a couple of big victories on our back. After a disappointing defeat at White Hart Lane, albeit a draw at Anfield, we were effectively dominated throughout that game, and of course we've come away from Stamford Bridge the weaker side. Now, Old Trafford's a place that over the last few years we've really struggled at, but you've got to think that the way they're playing, and much the same was said last season, but surely this is one of the best opportunities we've had, given the results and performance of the team in recent weeks. Are you feeling confident for this United game? How important exactly is this game for us now, and how much do you really think hinges on this match at Old Trafford on Monday night?
I hate United. I hate going there. I mean, Arsenal going there. I can't stand Old Trafford because it does something to either a team or a manager, or I don't know what happens, but for some reason we turn into a championship side and it's frustrating to watch. However, not having Van Persie there is going to help a lot, I think, for the team and for the manager himself. The fact that Fergie is no longer there might help. The fact that Vergaal is an absolute punt might help. I don't know. I just needed to put that in there. No, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm scared. Of course I am, because our record against Manchester United is shocking. Is this a good opportunity for us? Yes, it is. But I have this slight feeling that United are going to win by some penalty that they do not deserve, or by some unlucky goal, or something really, really stupid and frustrating that's completely out of our hands. I think that's going to happen. I think they're going to win. Is this game important for us? Yes, of course it is. I mean, if we lose, we're not going through in the FA Cup. If we win, we do. And if we win, we finally end that stupid thing we have at Old Trafford. So I want to see us win, and I think we can do it. But I'm very scared that we're not going to have like a referee that is completely unbiased. I'm just scared they're going to do some stupid Manchester United stuff that they always do, and probably dive and get a penalty for something stupid like tripping over grass. That's what I'm scared of.
Right. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be atypical if our previous results in games at Old Trafford are anything to go by. I mean, personally, I'm equally as scared, certainly extremely fearful for this game. And I think best case scenario is for us to get a draw at Old Trafford and bring it back to the Emirates.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably going to be our target going into the game. I mean, I'm sure we'll look to win the match, but I think we'd be the happier of the two sides to come away with a draw. But listen, Ava, I think we're wrapping. I think we're coming to an end of the podcast. But it's been an absolute pleasure and a delight to have you on. Thank you ever so much for taking the time out of your evening to join with us tonight.
No problem whatsoever. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem at all. And listeners, if you would like to follow the wonderful Ava on Twitter, her Twitter handle is at Ava EVA MCL3. So do go ahead and give her a follow. And hopefully, Elliot and Paul will both be joining us again for the podcast after the United game. So I'm sure that should be a barrel of laughs. But until then, good night or good morning, good afternoon to wherever you may be. Cheers. Bye-bye.